Welcome back to Who Doesn't Have a Podcast? I'm Michael, this is Jerome, and this week we're sponsored by Visit Midnight. Looking for a former mining colony to vacation with your friends? Visit Midnight. Explore the vast caves and structures. Laugh as you learn all about various diamonds that once populated the surface. Watch as your friends get possessed by a demonic entity hell-bent on tormenting human beings by either taking over their voice or just standing behind them all the time.
This once-in-a-lifetime package can be available for you for 2 million creditons.
Terms and conditions apply. Refunds not available, and you might not come out alive.
So, Mike.
Hey, yeah, go for it.
No. Well, I was just going to say another week, another episode down. I think it's fair to say, do we start with this? I don't know. I mean, we should probably start with the episode itself, but I feel like after your revelations last week, not revelations, but just, suggestions and accompaniments to looks, we've kind of got to talk about Andrew, don't we? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't care about Mrs. Flood now. I want to know who Andrew is. Screw Mrs. Flood.
Episode by episode, tweaking it.
Who's Andrew? Because let's be honest, it was pretty bang on, wasn't it? Like everything we thought it would be turned out to be what happened. And funnily enough, I was actually watching it with a family who I'm very friendly with on Saturday. And I said to them at the beginning of the episode, I was kind of going through the theory and I was like, yeah, we're talking about it on the podcast. There's this Andrew, there's this mysterious Andrew who's kind of made out all these theories. And we were talking about it being a sequel to Midnight. And that's exactly how it went down. So how do you feel now knowing that and now seeing that? Do you reckon you've seen enough episodes of this series to go, Andrew's going to nail it every single time and it's going to be a part of the whole meta thing?
So building on what we said last week, I'm confident that the leaks are on purpose because they're so accurate. Yeah. So I think that most of it's been leaked. I think certain things have been thrown in there as, as kind of like breadcrumbs, but won't come to pass. So here's what I predict won't happen. I don't think Ncuti Gatwa is leaving. I think that is also been planted and that's wrong. I think there's probably been a plan in place. I think there will have been. I think Doctor Who will have been renewed, and I'm just thinking about this now. I think what's going to happen is all this talk about it being cancelled and Disney pulling out. I think is part of a meta marketing campaign, and none of that is true. But to make it credible, I think they're thrown in with leaks that are true, like about specific plot points of the episode. And the only reason I think that is because Miss Flood last week barreled on the camera at the end, said the show's almost over, or something like that. So yeah. I don't think it's
So it's really interesting you mentioned that actually, because it is becoming more front and center, isn't it? The idea of it's over, it's done, it can't continue. I think that's really interesting. Interestingly, on Mrs. Flood as well, and I know again we're starting at the end of the episode rather than the episode itself, but we might as well. Did you think? I thought she came across as a lot more sinister this week, noticeably sinister, whereas her previous sort of entrants have been kind of slightly aloof or slightly batty or whatever it is. There's just been this kind of sort of crazed energy to her. But this week, and to be fair, it might purely have been done to match the kind of the tone of the episode, because the well is a significant shift from what we've had. But it did feel like, I don't know, there was some sort of slightly darker kind of serious energy to her. What did you think?
There's a debate at the moment, isn't there, about whether she's a villain or whether she's on the side of the Doctor, and that hasn't been answered yet. But I agree with you. This week was more sinister, and she seemed to particularly have an interest in this device that the Doctor's using as he travels around to sort of calibrate the TARDIS, right? So she's specifically the Vindicator. Yeah, so she was specifically like, oh, good that that's being used. I don't know what you think. I'm into the fact she's in every episode. However, it does feel like a bit of a retread about Susan Twist. It's the same thing, just again.
Well, to be fair, Russell referenced that, didn't he? He said, there's a lot of similarities between the Susan Twist thing, but this one is kind of someone who, the big difference, of course, is someone who was completely out of the know, who literally was a harbinger and didn't understand it or didn't have a concept of it, and Mrs. Flood, who is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-encompassing. So there's there's one big kind of, deep-lying change between the two of them. But I do agree with you, it does very much feel like a formula-based kind of recurring antagonist. If she is an antagonist, I mean, I've heard some theories about her. There's loads are coming out now. Everyone's got different ones, but I'm starting to slightly lie heavier on the fact that she is some sort of god entity, because I know there have been theories on is she a doctor before William Hartnell's doctor? Is she Susan? Is she, just like loads of different aspects of different characters. I just like, especially after we had the stuff with like different new Time Lord characters and Tecteun and all of this, I kind of get the impression that, and now that it's the reality war, which will be coming up, I just get the impression that she is going to be revealed as some sort of god kind of figure, who maybe that's why it's a bit ambiguous, because like you take like Lux, for example. Lux, it was difficult to fully define whether Lux was a protagonist or an antagonist. I mean, probably I would say like leaning more towards antagonistic behavior for sure. But in terms of like their overall goal, it didn't come across as like black or white. It was very much like a grey sort of agenda. And I'm wondering whether that's where Mrs. Flood is also kind of taking. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm much on the same line of view. I think she is a god. That's my theory. That's the official Who Doesn't Have a Podcast theory, is that she's a god. And I think she's probably the god of storytelling. And I know that last week I said that because they did that meta thing, that probably wouldn't come back into play as like the Doctor being trapped in a story. But I'm going to go back on that because I think it was you that said they're still alive at the end, those three characters in Lux. And I wonder if that's because they were a separate thing going on, but within, within the story, like the Doctor was fooled into thinking that it was Lux, but maybe Mrs. Flood is orchestrating that. So, yeah, I think we're going to see those three characters again. I think.
I think you're definitely right. Yeah.
So I think that's probably it. It's that, or she's Susan, but I think that's a bit too obvious. Or there's that. Who's that old Time Lord from the old series? Was it Romana? I don't know.
What assistant? Romana.
Yeah.
Romana
so
there was two versions, which they tried to make part of the lore, but I think it was just to do with the fact that an actor left. But it's not a show; it's all real. It's all real. It's fine.
Yeah. So I think it could be here as well. Like it's like sorry, I'm thinking about the Rani, the Time Lord, the Rani.
Well, the Rani's an interesting one because the Rani is a Time Lord or Time Lady, as they documented her at the time. But it's the Rani is like specifically kind of mad scientist vibes. Like that's kind of what made her stood out at the time, which I don't feel kind of is the reflective persona of what Mrs. Flood currently has shown. I don't know. But it's interesting because I've kind of started looking into like gods and stuff just to kind of not spoil it for myself, but just kind of like start to.
You host a Doctor Who podcast, to be fair.
I host a Doctor Who podcast, so I am the god of spoilers, bad spoilers. But it's interesting because it's hard to kind of pin down what she is, because it kind of feels like fourth wall breaking and media and the sort of game show aspect, and it's difficult to try and shift that into like a mythological standpoint. But I do think there is going to be some sort of godly world connection. I mean, there was people the one theory is going around linking her to the god of disaster, which would make sense, I think, given everything. It just probably sounds a little bit too obvious, but of course it could very well be that.
Yeah. I thought this week watching it, this is just a theory, that so the Doctor and Belinda can't get back to this date in May.
Yeah.
Is it May 25th or something? Yeah, they can't get back to that date. And then in this episode, The Well, that's hammered home a little bit more because a lot of the characters haven't heard of Earth and haven't heard of the human race.
Yeah.
So part of me thinks if Mrs. Flood is like the god of reality or the god of stories or fiction or something like that, what if the universe that they're in now is a made-up universe from Mrs. Flood, like a sort of fictionalized universe, and actually Earth hasn't been destroyed? It's that they're in a reality where Earth doesn't exist. So so the Doctor thinks he's getting bounced back, but actually there isn't anywhere to get bounced back from in this reality. I thought maybe that could be the explanation as to why. But then that wouldn't explain why you've got pieces of like the Eiffel Tower and taxis like floating through.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pocket universe that they don't realize is a pocket universe. Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's definitely there's like obviously, because we've got to go through all the episodes, but there's like a vital piece of information missing. And I agree with you. I think like the Earth, because you look back through the previous series, like what's happened, and like the only thing I was kind of relating it to is like when they doubled the TARDIS in the end of the 60th, and whether there is some form, and like now we know that Sutekh was riding on the back of the TARDIS that whole time. Like, if there's multiple TARDISes, multiple Doctors, multiple timelines, is it a case that like, yeah, there's kind of been that sort of spaghetti junction meeting where things have just got so lost that it's almost
so
like
it could all come back to the giggle. Like it could be when he did that with the TARDIS and it split in two.
Yeah, there was a link. There was a throwback to that in Lux, wasn't there, with the laugh and stuff, and kind of the pantheon of Discord, which has now like been given a name. And there's a couple of other like belonged members to that club who have featured in Doctor Who before, but haven't featured in this new Who. So like you've got, and its name's gone right out of my head at the most convenient moment.
I know the Sarah Jane Adventures one.
You've got Trickster.
Yeah.
But then you've also got, there's the snake figure whose name I cannot remember. I'm pretty sure it was like a
Dan Moss.
You know, like let's not talk about snakes too much that aren't here right now. But it was, I can't remember the name of it. Snake Dance. No, that was a serial with Peter Davison. It will come back to me. I can't remember. But basically, like, there's been a couple of characters that have sort of featured in this pantheon over different Doctors. So
well, there's a good segue. There's you know, a theory that the Midnight Entity is one of these creatures, and that, you know, and that back in series 4, David Tennant's era, that was his kind of first meeting of a pantheon of, you know. So I do want to talk about this because I don't want this to be a review. So I was thinking about this. Maybe I'm too in my head. I hate reviews because reviews are like, it's like, I always feel like as a reviewer, I'm like, what the fuck do I know? Like, let's see me write a better episode of Doctor Who. Like, it's stupid. Like, I hate the word review. So I'm more just going to think about it more as like a discussion about the episode.
Mike, has someone come for you? Has someone come? Are you being forced to say this? Has someone sent you an email and we're like, we're coming for you. We're going to get you.
Can you imagine in the future, like, this had never happened, but yeah, I love writing, you know, like I do a bit of writing. If I ever wrote for Doctor Who and then some fucking nerd on the internet was like, oh shit, I'm like, shut up.
Got your mouth.
So this episode, right? Yeah. Annoyingly, I'm like, we host a Doctor Who podcast, and that's annoying because we find out loads of spoilers. That would have been such a good reveal. Obviously, we knew it was coming, but it would have been such a good reveal for him to say, you know, what was this planet called? Midnight, and then the David Tennant, you know, we'd all be like, oh my fucking God. So we knew in advance, which kind of takes a little bit of the surprise away. Now, I would say this. The episode as a whole, I thought was phenomenal. It was basically like a horror. Like, I love horror. I love it. You know, it's my favorite genre. This episode of Doctor Who eclipsed most horrors that I've seen in recent memory in terms of like that kind of thrill, scare, jump scare. And there's a specific moment. Now, obviously, there were jump scares littered throughout, but there's a specific moment where one of the soldiers that are there looks at what's the character's name? I can't even remember the actor's name. Rose
Eiling Ellis, I want to say.
Yeah, so looks at Rose Eiling Ellis's character, and it's not even one of the jump scares where you can kind of see what the creature behind her. It's just her looking at him like straight down the barrel of the camera, and they play this music like it just goes dun, and it was I genuinely jumped out of my seat. Like genuinely jumped out of my seat, and that hasn't happened in a long time, and I love that it's an episode of Doctor Who that made me do that.
I really enjoyed it as well. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was just, and I tell you the thing I really enjoyed the most about it as well is just this callback to like sci-fi and like heavy sci-fi vibes, and the kind of, you know, the sort of the science and the mystery behind it that I think hasn't been lacking, because I appreciate they've just taken it in a different direction, but it just felt like, and like you say about the villain or the kind of, you know, whatever this thing is, and that's something I love as well, is it's ambiguous but in all the right ways.
Yeah,
it's still ambiguous, and it's like all of those like little kind of like, what did I see someone's face? Did I see, like, at one point, I'm sure the first one I was like, I'm sure that was a bald guy. I'm sure. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was really, really briefly.
I don't know about you, mate, but I was rewinding it. I was rewinding it because that's my favorite thing about horror films. Because I was literally like, did I see something or did I not see something?
Yeah. and I saw it, and but then like the next time I saw it, it looked like something completely different. So it was really interesting. And I feel like sometimes, like, you know, when you don't know what something is or there's too much ambiguity, it can just be frustrating, right? You're watching it and going, oh, for God's sake, like, just, you know, get to the point already. But when they execute it like that with a monster like that, it's so good, because like the scenes are genuinely frightening, right? And we talk about, like, obviously Ncuti Gatwa and the tears, and that's a big thing at the moment. But like in that scene where he realizes and he's right next to Rose's character, it's like it's terrifying, and it's a terrifying moment for him. So funnily enough, actually, when I watched this episode, immediately after, with the people I was with, we watched Midnight. We straight away. And they're both really, really, really good episodes in different reasons. Now, my honest opinion is, as much as I enjoyed The Well, I don't think it's as good as Midnight. That's not because I didn't enjoy it, but only because I really, and to be fair, I have to put context to this. A bit like yourself, I'm a huge horror fan. I've seen a lot of horror films. I've played a lot of horror video games. So like there are maybe things that I can see coming or don't make me jump in the way that they probably would a lot of people. But I remember I watched the two of them together, and I think the only thing that for me Midnight does slightly stronger, just how intimate it is. The whole thing takes place in that space carrier, and it's like, and between the seats, and it's terrifying. And obviously when the 10th Doctor's voice gets taken over, and he's being saved by a solo Converse against, like, you know, the chairs and stuff, like that was, it was like panic. It's just constant panic all the way through. And I think The Well had loads of moments that were like that, like the bit where she keeps turning and they're all getting thrown, you know, to the side. Like the way that was filmed and done, like really panicking. I just felt like it was more of an open area, so it didn't quite have that level of sort of panic invested in kind of intimacy. And also, like in Midnight, I kind of going back to it, I was like, the shit. I mean, you know, David Tennant is an incredible actor, and it was just that kind of believable, convincing nature he has of like, this guy has fought Daleks, Cybermen, like everything, the Master. And yet he's going to be defeated and ultimately defeated by 6 humans. There aren't even like 6 humans who, I mean, he keeps relating to it in the episode. He's like, I am the cleverest person in the room. But it's just because they just make this decision where it's like, we've got to get him out. And you can see the absolute terrified nature of him. And I think Ncuti also like gave elements of that as well, particularly in the you know, the scene where he realizes and he goes, what's the name of this planet? Like the sheer convincing nature of how terrified his character was, I think was really, really good. And also I think to mention as well, we've mentioned her a couple of times, Rose Eiling-Ellis. What a performance! Oh my god!
Wow, yeah, I said that exactly. Fuck, it's like Midnight. Shit.
But that was incredible performance. So like just every emotion kind of going on. And amazing. And I didn't realize as well, because I think this is, so the gallery I work at is what we're currently doing a week's events of BSL and, you know, kind of things that are going on. We've had a lot of that community into the gallery this week. And I don't know whether they kind of marked this episode to fall on that week. I don't know if it's a national thing. I assume it is. But just it was like so convincing. And even the way, like, I really enjoyed, like, there were more subtle elements this time, like when the Doctor was basically going like, keep her here, that's it. And she was like, I can still lip read, you know, just stuff like that, where it was like, yeah, I totally get the message that's behind here and what we're saying about the community and people's relationships to that community. But it was just done in a way that wasn't as on the nose. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah. So apparently a lot of that was from the actress. So, you know, apparently I watched an interview with Russell T Davies, I think it was Doctor Who Unleashed, where they were saying they learned a lot from her in terms of what they could put. And I think that's so important. Yeah. So cool. There's so much stuff I want to discuss with you there. The first one is, I love the juxtaposition between Midnight, which is a bottle episode, very, you know, tight cast in a tight location, a really scary, you know, execution of like a particular villain and like psychological torment. If you're going to do a sequel to Midnight, and I love that they did, the rest of, you know, people always say you can't touch episodes like that. They're classic episodes, don't ruin them. I love the boldness of going, fuck it, we're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a sequel episode, don't make it the same thing, because if you make it the same thing, it is just gonna pale in comparison to the original. I love that it had a broader scope. It was bigger. It was more sci-fi. You know, all of that. I think they did that perfectly.
Yeah.
I loved that the monster let's assume that it's the same monster. I think it's
Yeah.
safe to say that it is. And the reason I say that it is because it knew the Doctor's name because it's been in the Doctor's head, right?
Yeah.
So, way back when it tormented David Tennant's Doctor and therefore knew the Doctor. The I love that they didn't just repeat the same old tricks. So, if it was just repeating and then slowly taking over speech and thought, we'd be like, oh, we've seen that before. Okay, they're doing that again. I love that it had a different thing, which was just like not being in sight, like behind someone, I thought was terrifying, like really terrifying.
Line of sight is
Yes.
like instantaneous death. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that it had evolved from what it was. Like it is something that just liked to torment and play, and it found a new way of doing it. I loved.
And that as well, like it was convincing because of the 400,000 years that had passed. So the idea of this monster having formed new powers or skills or a different kind of realm was completely believable. Yeah, I think it was really, really, really well done. And the only slight thing that annoyed me, but again, it's a minor thing, is because obviously the script requires certain things, but I just didn't feel like how believable it was. Like when, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the character, but basically the other second in command who's like, I'm not having the Doctor at all. Who is this guy? Like it's we're not going for it. When the rest of the team or when some of the team start to back him for leader, I just didn't believe that.
Yeah, I didn't get that either, yeah.
I was like, you just wouldn't. But obviously I appreciate for the script, you kind of have to, you have to find a way to make that work. But I just didn't believe it.
Especially because the de facto leader was so evidently competent. Like his whole thing was like, oh, she's like lost her mind, whatever. It's like, no, she hasn't.
No.
What I would say is, I've just thought about this now. That is a little bit of a spin, and you'll know more because you've watched it more recently. That is a little bit of a spin on what happens in Midnight, right? They all sort of turn on the Doctor, and so it's that questioning of control and authority.
Yeah.
Right. What I was going to say, you touched on this before, is the one thing that I couldn't quite get behind, and I think I understand why they did it, but it lost a little bit of its edge for me, was I loved all of the jump scares and, the shots where there is someone behind the actress and it kind of just like goes in a little bit. I thought terrifying. How they were handling that whole thing like a clock was terrifying. I didn't like how the monster like killed people, like throwing them around. That it lost a little bit of its like scare for me. For me, it was much more scary what happened in Midnight, in sort of how it like basically like coaxes people to like throw people out of a shuttle bus. Right, is much more scary. And I wonder if there was a way they could have made it a bit more, because the episode is called The Well. Like maybe what happens when you go to the other side and see it is it possesses you and you just walk right into the well. Like, and it does something to you as opposed to just throws you around. I thought it was a little more.
I thought what was going to happen initially, which didn't, which is fine, they went their own way with it. But I thought what could have been interesting is if you're going to use someone who is like a BSL character, just like, can it affect people through sign language? That would have been amazing. Do you know what I mean? As in, that would have been an amazing thing. Or just like, in terms of, it doesn't just have to be vocal gesture, it can be physical as well. I thought that would have been a really interesting thing to kind of explore with.
I like that.
But I get it. I feel like what we were meant to take from that is basically like, how do we break someone's neck without their being like the use of blood, like over violence, or like remembering it is a family show? Because I can believe like the idea of like someone being chucked away if basically this entity has just gone, I've snapped your neck, that's insta death, and then they're chucking them away, which I kind of get. I think that's kind of what it was meant to be, but obviously like it's a family show. There are some things that you have
Russell
to just
T Davies did say that as well. It was like there's 5-year-olds watching this. We can't see people breaking their neck. Also, my idea about them just walking into the well because they're possessed, that is grim. That is grim. Like, there's a lot of grim stuff in this episode. But if you just saw people commit suicide, that is...
I mean, and a Doctor Who has gone there on occasion. They have gone to grim things. I mean, like Torchwood definitely would go there. And there have been maybe more Stephen Moffat-based episodes that have kind of, explored that sort of violence, or like the idea of violence, at least in a big way. So I agree with you. I think it maybe felt a little bit tonally lighter than the rest of the episode, those moments, but I appreciate why they probably had to do that. And I can still believe like I was still, there was still a fear factor to the monster because, and they mentioned it, and which is, they didn't really have to show it because they mentioned it, because I think it was when they first arrived down there and they're exploring the cabins and they're like, all of their necks are broken, and it's like, oh fuck, like that is grim.
The production crew have like turned the bodies away from the camera so you can't actually see. It
was interesting as well because I thought that was going to link in. I thought they were going to go down the route of, well, the reason the necks have been snapped is because the vocal cords, right? Or in terms of like leading back from midnight. But they went a different way with it. And I think, like you say, it's good that they did. They didn't just try to retread the old episode. They tried to do something new with it. And I think on a large part, really, they succeeded. And also another thing to say is really enjoying Belinda as a character.
Yes.
Just the way, like, coming into her own, I feel like she already in 3 episodes, she just feels like she's got a lot more development than Ruby had. And that's no comment on Ruby Sunday, by the way, but just in terms of like, I just feel so much more like I understand this character a lot quicker already.
And I get their relationship as well. Like, I understand why they're why they're doing what they're doing.
With a cold TARDIS open for the first time in ages. But again, like the kind of costume changing again, just even little bits like that. It was a fun moment in an otherwise quite dark episode. I mean, I prefer the dark Doctor Who episodes. They've just got more meat to the bone for them, unless you're the Vashta Narada. But it's like, you've got...
What a joke.
Yeah, I know. That's the only one in this series of podcasts, folks, by the way. You're never getting that. But I do prefer these episodes as a rule. But I think as well, like they were... you need change, you need balance and stuff. But when like a dark Doctor Who episode hits, it really hits. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was terrifying. I thought it was really genuinely tightly plotted. I believed it as a sequel to Midnight. I believed everything that happened in it. I thought. Sorry, how do I say her name? Rose.
I think it's Eiling Ellis.
I thought Rose Eiling Ellis's performance was like phenomenal. I thought all the supporting cast were really good. It just felt good. Let's talk about the ending. So, read a few things. So when they escape, when the departing crew are stood in where they're stood, the little screen behind them. So there's 3 of them, but the little screen behind them says 4 life forms. So the thing escapes, right? I think that is what it's hinting at. But because it's also at the end where that character is talking, where the end scene with those 2 characters, where the woman who was there is saying that she's got the report to write up, and then it's hinted that the thing is behind her as well. So the rumor is that there was actually 2 entities, which I love. So one escapes and one is still there. And I read this thing today. I don't know if it was deliberately plotted or not, but the whole thing about it passing on to someone else isn't actually true. There's 2 of them, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of a tease. I don't think they'd ever revisit it in the near future, but it's a bit of a tease that whatever the plan was, they didn't actually escape.
I mean, is there any theory to say as well that it has escaped on the TARDIS and we just don't know, and maybe that's a later thing to come in? I'm not saying that is the case, by the way, but is there a theory?
I'm just like, how much can you do it without ruining it? Because what I loved is they expanded on the mystery of, you've watched Midnight recently, where it's just knocking on the door, all of that. They expanded on the fact that it's terrifying. They expanded on it without showing it. They showed tiny bits, and they gave you the satisfaction of the Doctor seeing it as well, to be like, oh, the Doctor was so intrigued by it, he needed to see it, and he did. But the fact that they managed to do a whole other 45 minutes on it without giving away any of the sort of mystery or intrigue, I thought was good. How many times can you do it? Yeah, and
I think they did it enough. They did it just right. It was, and just like the work between the characters as well, because it's very difficult, right, to sell a villain you can't see, because it really relies on everyone else. Like, if they're not convincing, or like, the relationships and how they're affected by it aren't convincing, then it doesn't mean anything. And I enjoyed the use of Mercury, just again that sort of science fiction element, just to kind of give it that sort of grounding, rather than going, I've got this spoon or I've got this like whistle and you can tie it to the console of the TARDIS and take a dog for a ride. But like, you know, like whatever it is. But I really enjoyed that use of like science fiction to like kind of deal with an entity. But yeah, I like the idea of it being out there. I like the idea of it being unnamed as well. It's like you think back to, what's that Peter Capaldi episode where it's the one where the TARDIS gets really, really small, and which is quite funny,
well,
actually.
I think that episode's called Flatline. I think
you're bang on the money. And basically, like right at the end of the episode where the TARDIS returns to normal size, he's like, "I name you." And I can't remember what he names them, which is just ironic. But like he has that whole thing of like, I name you this, and I'm the guy who defeats the monsters. Whereas this, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it does. We don't know like kind of what it wants. And to make those things, you know, that ambiguous nature of any character work so effectively is you know, kudos to the writers, kudos to the production team.
It's phenomenal. Also, I just think the series as a whole has been like, we had a strong opener. Like none of us were really down on the opener, which is quite unusual. Lux was great. I think a really, really great episode. I'll give it a 10 out of 10. This episode again, like I'm thinking it's just the fact that they just gave us like a bona fide horror story. I just love it. And it was genuinely scary.
And to be fair, sorry, no, go on, finish.
Was it? So do you remember the episode of Peter Capaldi's era that was found footage? I think Mark Gatiss wrote it or something. It was like a found footage one, and they were spoofing the found footage horror thing, and all the stuff leading up to it was like, oh, it's a found footage horror, and you watch it. No, I can't remember what it's called. God, we're great.
That's actually a Doctor Who episode. You've just mentioned that, and I've got no recollection of that whatsoever. Like I have no recollection of Dan ever being here in this podcast.
It's funny, I was down a well that was 5 miles deep and I just couldn't find the light.
Trying to climb your way out. Well, your car was down a well that was 5 miles deep.
Yeah, I turned around and the fucker just vanished. Just launched into the sky. Didn't know how the hell it happened.
Is there someone with you?
What you did there?
Please don't turn around, Dan.
I have said all that we've got to say about this. I'll give you a little bit of context of what we talked about. So we loved that it was basically a horror episode, genuinely scary. I said at the start, I genuinely jumped out of my seat at certain points. There's a bit specifically at the start where the creature, you don't see anything about the creature behind her, but as the person looks at her, her stare and the music and the jump, I was like, fucking hell. We're both big on the episode, so over to you.
And we're also saying that Rose Eiling-Ellis was amazing in it, who was the BSL character. Just like sold it completely, like amazing.
Yeah. Standout episode, I think, of Ncuti Gatwa's reign so far, 100%. I loved the casting of Rose as well. She was an absolute standout star in the episode as well. I find it amazing how inclusive Doctor Who's been over the years, and this is the first time we've properly seen sign language involved to such a major extent in an episode. I thought it was so long overdue, but also so brilliantly executed this time round. One thing I did note, it's interesting that you mentioned about the music and the kind of waves and sound with the kind of moments of terror. At the very beginning of the episode was the first time I properly noticed like the orchestral compositions in an episode. I've never really paid much attention to it apart from this one. So unless it was done in a slightly more obvious way, I thought like at least sonically it was a stellar episode as well. That for me is Doctor Who.
You said this last week. Yeah, you said this last week. You were like, yeah.
And I feel like now, and I'm kind of praying now that it's really kind of kicked into its stride now. And this is kind of like the sort of style of the show that we are going to see more of as the series pans out. I thought when the Doctor faced the creature, that just the silence from that was so loud, so loud. You could just see that abject horror running through his body, and that the kind of flashback as well to Tennant in the episode of Midnight. Kudos to you both, by the way, for identifying that. A major shout a couple of weeks ago.
Can I just trumpet my own horn for a minute? That's not a phrase. Can I just blow my own horn for a minute?
It is.
I don't know if you remember our predictions, boys, but I did say that it was going to be a mining colony, that it was like then they mined diamonds. Now, I just remembered that I did say that that's what released the monster. I guess that's right though, because it was a well. They dug a well, so I am right. And also, but Jerome said that it would be the Valengard, that corporation that like took over the planet, and I agreed with him. But yeah, that wasn't true. So, but yeah, basically, I'm a Julius, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, and I think what I loved about the episode more than anything else is it kept you on your toes right up until the end credits. Can you hear that? Doctor Who approval siren kicking off.
We can't hear anything of it.
Oh, in fact, there was a police siren just timed perfectly then.
Are you sure your car's not just been nicked?
It's gone.
The
completely...
garage got a spare key.
Yeah, they undersold me on the MOT, and I've been rinsed.
Just something to mention on that as well, very, very quickly. So apparently this episode, the ratings are rumored to be higher, and I think that in part will be due to.
He's gone. Sorry, your internet cut out.
Gone. It was doing so well. It was so well for so long.
Go on, can you say why it would? Yeah.
So I think in part that would be due to Lux, and even if people didn't watch Lux, I think they probably heard about the smoothness of how the cartoon elements were used and stuff, and I think it probably brought people back for this. So it's good because it feels like every episode's got stronger. So you might find the ratings pick up from this point here on in.
But I mean, I'm not super into the next time trailer for Lucky Day. Like, I think it's fine. I love the idea of revisiting Ruby, but the monster that they've got going on in it, I'm like, are we about to fall off a cliff edge of 2 amazing episodes of Doctor Who? And now we're just going to go back to.
It did. I was worried. I was worried because it did look like, the bigger, more steroid version of Pating, which I'm not here for. But we'll see. We'll see. I'll reserve judgment.
So, Jerome, do you need to jump off now then?
I will probably need to shoot off. I can give you a score, and I can also give you my brief thoughts on next week. So I think I would probably score this an 8.5. Very much enjoyed it. Thought it was a very, very good episode. The only thing I said to Mike, Dan, before you came was I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed the horror elements, but I watched Midnight straight after watching this episode, and for me, it doesn't quite hit the heights of scare that Midnight did. And I think the only reason for that is that Midnight taking place in that space carrier, it's so intimate and it's so small and it's so terrifying, especially with the knocks and stuff, that for me it doesn't quite match that level of fear, but it was very good.
I know what you mean, because I think they kind of allude to in the episode, don't they? It's 400,000 years of learning from people, so it's not going to do so much like the learning of words and kind of like psyche. It's going to be more of the physicality side of it now, the strength, that kind of like hidden concealed power.
Yeah, but it was really good. Mike was saying earlier, it was really good that it had changed. They didn't just try to retread what it had done. Like, it had learned, it was coming up with new stuff, and that was very, very good. And before I leave, next week, Ruby Sunday. It will be interesting to see Ruby with Belinda. 2 different assistants in the TARDIS. That always makes for an interesting episode. Yeah, I don't really know too much about. Do we know what it's called? I can't remember what it's called. I know Lucky Day. Unit. It's going to be a heavy Unit episode, isn't it? By all accounts, probably Unit. Has Andrew said anything?
It's. I don't think. Maybe I haven't seen anything.
But Unit.
The only thing I know a little bit about it is that Russell T Davies says that it explores PTSD with the Doctor's companions, which is good, because let's not forget, Ruby did throw a leash around a big, massive god dog.
The best description of that episode I've ever heard. She just threw a leash around a god dog. All hell kicks off. She's now got PTSD.
At least
therapy. I think
you've lost your mind. You just know which episode that is right away. You're like, oh yeah, the god dog and the leash. But it'll be interesting because, and also, like, what does that mean for Earth? You can't get back to Earth. The Ruby.
Love that, Jerome. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
So it's a case of like, are they going back to? Do they get back to Earth? Is it a pocket Earth? Is this even the real Ruby? There's a lot of questions there. And Unit, because I think I saw something on the quick bio of it that it's basically like people are questioning Unit and going, how come you're meant to be this like, sort of anti-alien terrorist organization, and yet you're really fucking shit at your job, lads. Like, everything's been attacking us for the last 20 years, since 2005. So, it will be interesting to see where that goes. But Earth, the big Earth question, which I shall leave to you both.
Just before you go there, Jerome, can I just quickly say that it's good that this series, we're quite passionate and animated about this, which is, I don't know if we were at this point with series 1, the fact that we're like 3 episodes in and I'm genuinely properly invested in the ongoing arcs in this series, I think is good. I think that's good for Doctor Who.
I'd agree. I would really agree. And I think there's a good, we're not halfway through this series yet. There's still quite a lot to go as well. So I feel like there's scope to really kind of, put some storylines together. And because it's the same with all Doctor Who series. We're going to get some answers, but we're going to get so many more questions. There's going to be so many more questions by the end of the series. But yeah, the other thing, I'll have to go for this point now, but also, Dan, you should mention what your thoughts on Mrs. Flood were, because my personal feeling right now is a bit more sinister this episode, but I'll leave that with you. And boys, I shall see you next week. Adieu.
See you next week for Lucky Day.
Goodbye.
So, his haircut, by the way. I know those that are listening won't see it, but he really suits a short back and sides. Good on him.
Shame he'll never know, because I'll cut that part right out.
I've actually made a really, really good sick point there about Earth no longer being a thing, in theory, because now that puts the Doctor and Belinda now in a complete conundrum of really now, if no one has any recollection. I mean, it could be a generational thing. It could be, like you say, we might go into an alternate universe. I mean, we've gone through like the alternate universe. Look at Rose Tyler's dad. We've been through like the alternate timeline of planet Earth, and we've seen that before. So that'd be really fun to see. But yeah, Mrs. Flood, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but there's more variations on Mrs. Flood, and I mean like vocally. Like she sounded like very. Her accent and her voice has changed with each passing episode now, so it's a full identity change. Now, whether that's just her kind of shape shifting into this might be something that's clips for the future. If it's something that she's kind of shape shifting and kind of like molding herself into various versions of her surroundings, and maybe there's kind of an ulterior end message, which there probably will because it's Doctor Who. I don't know, but yeah, it was a lot more. I think sinister is the perfect way to describe it. It was a properly chilling, frightening episode. Even the final beat of that episode was just classic horror. It was
it was an amazing, that's such a good point. It was an amazing 45 minutes of horror. Like Jerome and I were saying before you jumped on, we love horror. Like horror is my favorite fictional thing. It really is. And I genuinely absolutely jumped out of my seat at certain parts. There's that moment that I was talking about where you don't see the creature behind her, but it's just the way that they do, how she's looking, how the soldier's looking, and you just jump. Like I fully jumped. And the couple of times that Belinda, there's that amazing moment where Belinda's talking about Earth, and she just turns to the actress and goes, "Do you know anything about Earth?" But she gets cut off because you do see something behind her, and it just peeks out, and it was honestly like proper jump scares, like amazing. Yeah. We were saying about Mrs. Flood is there is a debate at the moment about whether she's a goodie or a baddie, which I think is purposely ambiguous. We don't know yet, do we? We really don't know. But this episode is more like sinister. Well, she's more sinister in it at the end. Yeah.
I think it's too early to tell, like you said. I think you'd just be clutching at straws and you'd be looking at like the previous appearances and trying to find some tangible way they come together. It'll be like Bad Wolf. It'll be like the Vote Saxon thing. We'll look back at this series and there will be so many hints that we haven't picked up on. That you'll go back and you'll kick yourself because they were so blindingly obvious.
Do you think that she now in the next episode reverts to being Ruby's neighbor again?
Do you know what? I feel like it would be too obvious.
Okay.
At this point, I feel like we've seen, because wasn't she in the first episode? She was Belinda's neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if she's not there, someone else will be, and they'll be tied in with her in some way. Okay. I don't think. Yeah. I wonder if the plot twist that there isn't just one Mrs. Flood. This is kind of like sparse, and there's like multiple versions of her.
But that is exactly what they did with Susan Twist, didn't they? Because Jerome and I were kind of thinking, like, I'm enjoying Mrs. Flood being in every episode, but it feels like a bit of a retread on the Susan Twist thing. And if you remember, one of the big reveals about her is every time that the TARDIS lands and Sutekh lands, like Sutekh spreads out a version of like Susan Twist into that reality. If there's multiple versions of Mrs. Flood, I feel like it's just a bit. It's like we've seen it before, So I think it must be deliberate that she's in every episode as Susan Twist was, and there's like parallels It must be deliberate because it's very similar.
It's got to be. It absolutely has to be. And speaking of Belinda, this is the episode where I think I've well and truly fallen in love with her as an assistant, because she just has the empathy and the heart and the fear. Whereas like Ruby, we've mentioned it before, she was kind of like just riding the wave of enchantment and joy and just wonder, everything's going on. She's very much grounded, and given the circumstances are a lot more terrifying, she's been so much more self-aware of herself and her own mortality and the danger and the perils that traveling with the Doctor can put an assistant in. And I really love how she's kind of exploring that at the same time as the Doctor, I suppose, because he's kind of facing the threat now that he's never experienced before. He's never not been able to get back to where he needs to get to, really. Particularly Planet Earth. So obviously Gallifrey has its million reasons, but for Planet Earth, it's almost like it's like a go-to point with that issue. This is given that kind of feeling now that it's going to be a far more terrifying situation than we first were led to believe.
At this point, I'm thinking that I think Mrs. Flood is like the god of reality, or like the god of fiction or stories or something. And I think they're currently in a reality where Earth never existed. So that's my theory. So when we've got the characters in this episode being like, oh, we've never heard of the human race, we never heard of Earth, and the Doctor and Belinda are getting bounced off a specific date, a specific location, I think they're getting bounced off because that doesn't exist in the reality that they're in. So they're not technically getting bounced off. There's just nothing there to bounce to. That's currently where I'm at. And I think that's been orchestrated by like Mrs. Flood.
It's a bit like a bouncing ball, isn't it? Because every time you throw a bouncing ball on the ground, it bounces into a completely different direction. It never goes the same direction twice. So you just feel like this is kind of like the sort of springboard to.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So they're like they like go and then they get bounced back to all these different realities. I think it would be cool.
And maybe like them trying to hone in on Earth is pulling Mrs. Flood further in. She's maybe the only one that is aware of them, and she's maybe using that to track them down bit by bit. Hence why she's entering all these realms, and we're seeing it more often. She's using it to kind of fully track down the Doctor.
Can you imagine if we've just got it bang on?
If we have, I swear to God, I've never been prouder in my life.
You're right for Doctor here.
We'll have to clip this, definitely. I mean, what else? Oh, it broke my heart as well. Who was the name of the sort of leader, the captain leader?
I don't know, that they did such a good job with. Yeah, let me see if I can find it and I'll clip it in. Such a good job of building out an arc for that character within the time that they had.
And you know what? I think that's what's been missing from Modern Who is a full or a complete story arc or character arc. I feel like we've been so focused on the story and where the Doctor's going to go next, we've kind of lost the character element to it. That's kind of like what makes Doctor Who as brilliant as it is, because it has you start, middle, and end, and this one almost certainly did. And she blew me away. The fact that she was running from her home planet and she was still running away from this. It really did move me. I did get choked up. I'm not going to lie. It was. Her
name was Shia Kastalian. So the Doctor convinces. So she's the platoon leader, Shia Kastalian.
I loved how we had another stars in their eyes moment where they went into the TARDIS, got the new costume change, and came out. We had a bit of Toxic by Britney Spears. The first time I think
that'll be a recurring. I think they'll do that a few more times.
I think that's not the end. Definitely not. I loved that the Doctor was throwing gang signs. He was like going like this, and I thought, okay, the Doctor is so cool. Yeah, I think I'm. Like Jerome said, and I'm sure you'll agree as well. I feel like with how season 1 went, and it was such a shift in tone across the board, I didn't really connect to that anywhere near as much as I have now to these first 3 episodes. I feel like this has been a far more solid start to a season. It takes you back to feeling like a kid watching Doctor Who on a Saturday night on BBC One and being absolutely crap scared watching it.
Yeah,
that's how I felt.
And obviously, they can't do that week on week, but when you look at things like the original Midnight, Blink, and then this, they've nailed it. The only other thing that I wanted to say to see if this ricochets with you at all is in Midnight, one of the so Midnight's a bottle episode, and they did it for it's an amazing episode. It was retooled at the last minute because they needed to create something that was isolated, that wouldn't cost much, classic. But what they ended up with was something fantastic. It's so scary. with the monster just knocking on the side of the the shuttle bus, like, and then taking it. You never see it, and the way that it controls people is amazing. And half of the mystery, all of the mystery, is the fact that you don't know what it is. In this episode, what I didn't necessarily get on board with was when the soldiers or whoever got to that 12 o'clock post, they were thrown about, which I didn't like. It felt a bit too much like, I don't know, like it felt a bit too normal, like what happens with a monster. I would have loved something else as opposed to them just being like thrown to the walls. You know?
I know what you mean. I mean, Jerome and I did cover it before he left, and we sort of said I love how in the 400,000 years that creature has learnt the language, because you could kind of tell it was almost like the way it was wrapping its, like taking over the people and kind of wrapping its lips around like words and vocabulary for the first time it was learning, and it was like kind of really seeping in. And over that time, it's gone beyond that, where it's gone, right, it's brute force now. There's no one else around. Actions speak louder than words, and I've got to kill people. I've got to throw myself around.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I feel like if there were maybe slightly different ways, because I feel like a creature like that would be a bit more sinister in the way it would go and kill off people like that. There were one or two deaths where it kind of thrown around like a ragdoll. It's a bit like,
okay. It's a bit like, oh, okay. Like, it kind of all the tension for me at that point kind of went a little bit, because I was a bit like, it's a bit normal. I was saying to Jerome,
if you watch it back, you can clearly see one of them. It's like a pull cord or something, like they're being like hoisted up. You can tell where they've edited out the hoist point, because it's just like the way they jump up. No.
I said to Jerome that it would have been cool if it like takes over the mind of the person that sees it, and then they like walk into the well or something and just commit suicide. But then that is a bit bleak. I mean, the episode's bleak anyway. But 5-year-olds are watching this, so maybe we can't do that.
But that's, speaking of which, I quite like that about, again, the well itself, because it's still ominous, because you don't see how those miners died. You just see the camera feed cuts off. You don't know, because it would have been interesting to see maybe one of them come back.
Yeah.
Like, it could have been even. I mean, I know it's got to kind of balance the line, because it's ultimately for a bigger, younger audience, and you can't kind of go too deep into the horror thing. But I feel like, on the one hand, it would have been nice to see a bit more of the well, and maybe something that's lurking underneath. But at the same time, like you said, it kind of shows you stuff where you're never getting a solid answer. That's scarier still, because it's.
Do you remember the end of? Do you remember the end of Midnight, when they're just about to throw David Tennant out, and the flight attendant character grabs the lady who has hosted the Midnight Entity up to this point, says it's her, it's still her, and then they both go out of the shuttle together. Wouldn't it have been amazing if you had some sort of reappearance from one of those two bodies that were, it's really grim, but like kept alive all this time by the entity or something? Have one of those actors come back, and maybe that's the big reveal, rather than like them saying, what was this planet called? It used to be called Midnight, but hey, who knows?
You know what it felt like?
Maybe they tried, but they couldn't.
You've made a really, really good point there, because I feel like this was maybe more of a spiritual successor rather than a direct sequel to Midnight. The difficulty is, if you start doing sequels, I mean, if you start doing sequels to episodes, then it might alienate part of the fan base. But then you have reappearances of the monsters. I mean, we've the amount of times the Daleks and the Cybermen have come back, and there's always been some link to how they used to be. So I don't know. I'm completely open to the idea of there being more linked episodes and monsters of Who.
I think they got it right this time, didn't they? Like,
I think
homage to it, and something for the fans, but also like as a story, it just stands by itself.
And don't get me wrong. Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I think even those that are completely new to Who would have entirely enjoyed that episode without knowing the additional context. I think the additional context makes it more scary. So it's like you said, it's a bit of like a sort of love letter to the fans. Really, kind of go like, you like this, you're going to love this even more. I feel like, again, I just can't get over Rose Arling-Ellis. I just thought she was phenomenal in this.
Yeah.
It's
the guest actors that really elevate episodes of Doctor Who, isn't it? Obviously, you've got the core actors. You've got Ncuti Gatwa, you've got Barada Sethu, but when you've got phenomenal guest actors like Alan Cumming voicing Lux, it just brings the whole thing up.
I I think they've really nailed it with casting and everything else this year, and I just love the fact that they make that kind of full awareness of British Sign Language and the fact that it shouldn't be like a minority thing. It should be celebrated. It should be more commonly seen. I think putting it on the map in a show like Doctor Who is still long overdue and so wonderful as well. Yeah, I was an enormous fan of this episode, and I think I'd probably go. So Jerome gave it an 8.5. I
didn't realise we were doing 0.5s, Jerome.
Well, I know. I was gonna say, I definitely think it's an absolute 8, but I'm tempted to pull it up to a 9 because that's probably one of the best I've seen of this new era. What would you rate it?
9. My only reservation is that I didn't like the throwing the people around. That's my only thing, you know. I gave Lux 10 out of 10. I thought Lux was absolutely phenomenal. I do think this is phenomenal as well. So I am skating around a 10, but I'll go 9. No, do you know what, Dan? Fuck it. I'm going 10, and I'll tell you why I'm going 10. I love horror, and this genuinely scared me. And the fact that Doctor Who can do that to me still, as a 30-year-old man, I think is great. You must be a kid watching this. Fuck me.
Now they know how we feel, Mike.
Now, one other thing before we leave it for today is you were obviously in a bit of a rush to get here today, so you might not have clocked this, but at the very end, when the 3 people are escaping, the thing behind them says there's 4 people on board what they're on. So there's 3 of them, but then the thing shows 4 life forms. So obviously we get the end sting where that character is writing, saying, I need to write this up, but I don't know what happened. And then you get that moment where it's still there. But then the theory goes that there was also another one. So there's 2 of these entities, and one of them escaped on that shuttle with them, which I think is really scary. And the theory is kind of established a little bit more by a big thing of the episode is you can't the way that the character describes it is if you kill it, it jumps to the next person. The theory is that isn't true. There's just been 2 of them this entire time.
Oh my God.
Isn't that good?
That's fantastic. And I also kind of liked as well, even when the shot by the way, the shot with the commander, both shots were phenomenal, but particularly when the Mercury curtain just comes from behind.
Wow.
Even at that point, as you're focusing in, you still don't see it. And I think that beauty of not giving the audience, not giving it away, makes it even better. Because like you said, it's the fear of the unknown. What we can't see is even scarier than the reality.
Yeah,
I think they nailed it. Absolutely nailed it this time around.
We also loved that that it knew the Doctor's name because it had been inside the Doctor's head back in the David Tennant era. I thought it was lovely setup. Well, another episode that we all enjoyed. Hopefully they can keep up the momentum with Lucky Day. I'm not really confident by the trailer, but we've been surprised before.
I mean, again, there's not too much given away in that thing, so I'm quietly confident. Again, I think because we don't know so much about it, maybe there are plot points in this. Maybe there are big shifts in the story now. Because again, we've not seen Ruby in how long, and it's like you said, if she deals with PTSD, we've not really seen the character deal with the fallout of being apart from the Doctor, really, have we? So yeah, very excited to see what direction it goes next.
Thank you, Dan. If you enjoyed this episode of Who Doesn't Have a Podcast, please like and subscribe at Who Doesn't Pod. Also, will that thing behind you, can that like and subscribe as well? Join us next week for our review of Lucky Day and more fun and games.